So you are a prolific writer, and you put a lot of effort into the topic of agile management and leadership. And I think we're all looking forward to your talk today. Can you share a bit insight on the topic? What will we be enjoying over the course of the next hour?
I like to call myself a management geek because I study management. I practice management. We need management. I'm going to talk more about this in a few minutes, but we don't need command and control. And so few people understand how to manage without command and control. This is a real library. So there's, let me see if I can do this. There's management and project management over there. There's some mysteries over there. There's more people management stuff. Yeah, there's lots and lots of books because my name is Johanna Rothman. I have a little trouble with books because I like them. I'm going to start to share my screen now. So this is about modern management and adapting how you lead for Agile success. Because I have been around the Agile movement for years and years and years. I was a very big fan of how can you tell if it's done back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and O's. I was a fan of rolling way of planning very, very early on, back in the 80s. Once I understood, I developed the term inch pebble, which is a 1 or 2 day task that is either done or not done. That might sound a lot like small user stories to you now. And I have had great managers and horrible managers. And the horrible managers are why a lot of people think that we don't need managers when we have an Agile approach. I am sure that you have seen too fair share of horrible managers and too few really great managers. And that's because a lot of what passes for management, and I put management in quotes there, has very little to do with leadership and everything to do with control. A lot of people say we have managers and they are operational, and we have leaders and they are aspirational. I think that that's total nonsense. But we need to bring back leadership and management. Otherwise, we have no way of creating aspirations and meeting those aspirations. So I like to think about what Drucker said about organizing for purpose. And if we think about why management exists, then we think about managers managing themselves before they manage anybody else. I am sure all of you have seen people who are not that good at managing their emotions, managing their reactions. Now, I'm not saying you can never be angry about anything. You can absolutely be angry. But blowing up at people, throwing things, pounding the table, and not admitting that you're wrong, all those things are very, very bad. I really like to think about how can I think about how my actions affect the culture. And then I really like Drucker's idea of a harmonic whole, right? He said that managers create a harmonic whole for their teams. And that allows people to think about how do you make them feel? What are the feelings you have when you encounter these great managers? I realize that in our industry, a lot of us, and I include myself, are not that good about identifying our feelings. I'm going to ask you a little question later on, but I think you will find that we all have feelings about our teams and our work. And then every manager exists for one purpose. Well, I should say the organization exists for one purpose, and that's innovation. If you're not innovating, which might mean you drop some stuff that you used to do and you go on to other stuff that you need to do now, you will soon find that you don't have a valid organizational purpose anymore. So those are the three big ideas, right? Manage yourself, create a harmonic whole, innovate, and especially in management. And that's why management exists. So these are the 7 principles I'm going to talk about today. I will have the slides available later on, so I'm not going to walk you through all these principles. So let me talk first about how great managers manage themselves. I really like the idea of Virginia Satir's congruence model when I think about how people can manage themselves. There's ourself, there's the other person in the conversation, and then there's the context. Now, you might say, well, managers have to talk to many, many people. This is true. And every single person is an individual. So I suspect that many of you are agile coaches or enterprise coaches or some kind of a coach. If you are a great coach, in my experience, you always think about the person that you need to work with right now and the greater environment, the greater team, the greater organization. But every single coaching experience happens one-on-one first. And it's the same thing with management. The context is really key because what works in one environment might not work at all in another environment. So this is a 30-second explanation of congruence. A lot of our organizations actually ask us to blame other people. It's all about what we want. We disregard the other person. And that means that we blame them for not doing the thing that they might not even know that we wanted them to do. I have not figured out this mind reading thing. Every time I've been married for 37 years, every time I have these conversations with my husband in my head, and then what comes out of my mouth 5 minutes later, he has no context for that. If I blame him for not knowing what I want or what I'm thinking, I mean, that's not very fair, right? It's totally incongruent. One of the things we also do in the organization, especially if we have blaming, where people say, you must do this, and you must do this, and you must do that, and you have the finger of blame, is that some managers then placate those senior managers. So they disregard themselves. Worse, they disregard the team. So they roll the blaming downhill, which is a horrible thing. Super reasonable is when you only consider the context. And what's interesting about that is that some of us are super reasonable, where we forget that we are human, we forget that the other person is human, and we're only thinking about what are the responsibilities we have right now? What is the context? What does organization demand of me? And irrelevant is when you think about none of those issues. So imagine you're in a very difficult conversation, and especially with several people in the room, right? Virtual or physical room. And somebody says, how about those sports team? You're finally getting to the meat of the problem. You've tried to figure out what to do. You're having trouble getting to a conclusion, and somebody brings up sports. That's not all that helpful. Sometimes you need to break the stress in the room, but often irrelevant conversations, including an irrelevant conversation, does not do anything at all for the problem at hand. So when we are congruent, we balance the needs of ourself, the other, and the context. It has to be a balance. It cannot be all one or the other. So there are a whole ton of manager self-myths, and I'm going to focus on managers believing in indispensable employees. So imagine this scene. You have a manager who says, Steve is excellent, right? I'm sure there might be Steves in this presentation. I'm not talking about you. And Steve is wonderful. Steve can do almost anything. And all the rest of you need to work with Steve because he's so wonderful. I worked with this Steve like that many years ago. I was part of a 5 or 6 person development team. This is back before we had testers. And our manager was kind of the product owner a long time ago. And he said, we need this thing. And Steve said, I can do it, right? Well, he came to us, our manager came to us on Friday at noontime, just before we were all going to have lunch. He said, we need this and we need it really fast. Steve said, I'll do it this weekend. And the rest of us looked at him and said, every time you do this weekend all by yourself, we don't understand what you've done later on. He said, no, this time will be different. Okay. All of us kind of roll our eyes. We talk about what we think that we need the rest of Friday. We all go home except for Steve. We come back in Monday morning at 9 a.m. Steve is still there. We are pretty sure Steve has not taken a shower. He's kind of stinky. We're very sure he has not slept. He has that wide-eyed, caffeinated look where around the eyes you get this wild person look. And he said, I figured it all out. I did the whole thing. All you need to do is, anytime you hear all you need to do is, that's probably a tip that you have a lot more to do. So Steve had done a great first pass at this. And after he walked us through it in 10 minutes, which was not long enough, we all said, Steve, kind of stinky, kind of tired. Go home, take a nap, take a shower. Please come back when you've slept. We tried to figure out what that thing did the entire rest of the day. We had no idea what it did. And because Steve was this supposedly 10x developer, because we couldn't figure it out, we could not use anything. So Steve took the entire weekend and, in effect, wasted our Monday. On Tuesday, when he came back, he was so surprised we had not just taken this and run with it and finished it. It didn't need very much. And then we started to ask him questions. And of course, it needed a whole lot. So when managers believe in indispensable employees, they put the indispensable employee or the 10x person or the expert, and that person is a gating factor for all the work. So people cannot collaborate. They have no autonomy. They have no way to build their mastery. Instead, if you stop believing in managing yourself, I should say, in this indispensable employee, and ask, how can you support the entire team to work as a team and really enable everybody? Now you are managing your reactions to this need to getting work done fast. So there are several principles for managing yourself. Let me talk a little bit about the two that I've highlighted. I find that a lot of managers don't actually understand what the people do. I was a software developer and a software tester up until about 1985, from 1977 to 1985. Yes, I deserve all of my gray hair. Yeah, I am that old. Fine. So, and then I became a project manager, a program manager, a manager, all that stuff. I found that as soon as I had been out of the technical work for, I think about a year or two, I had no idea what people were doing. They had changed. How did they build? Totally changed. How did they compile? This is back when we had different kinds of compilers. How did we create something that the customers can use? I was no longer capable of understanding those particular decisions. I had to work at an upper decision level. So I have a principle for managing yourself, which is to assume that the people doing the work know what they're doing, right? That's my general assumption. And when I use that and build a safe environment, especially when I admit I don't know and then I need help, I make it possible for other people to admit they might not know and they might need help. And the reason this is so important for managing yourself is that when you say, I don't know and I need help, you make it safe for people to actually work together and you make it possible for them to collaborate. So let's talk about leading and serving others. Notice I'm not using the word managing here because managing is really about leading and serving. And leading and serving is not directing and controlling. So I am going to ask you to put your answers in the chat, and I have my chat over on the other monitor. So sorry if I look like I'm doing this kind of weird thing with my head. I want you to think back to the best manager you ever had. And I hope that you had a good one at some point. I have two questions. How did you feel when you worked there? And what do you remember? So put your answers in the chat because I would love to see what your answers are. How did you feel? Can you name those feelings? And what do you remember? Appreciated? Yeah. Safe? Valued? I remember how often she shared things openly with me, trusted, included, respected, asked for advice. Lunches. Oh, I really like that. That you probably had great lunches with your colleagues, and you might not have agreed on everything, but you remember the feeling of working together. Trusted, supported, a partner, or collaborated. Yeah, protected. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that your manager would protect you. Well, thank you. So I'm going to ask you the other side of this question. Think back to just one of your terrible managers. How did you feel when you worked there? And what do you remember? Do you remember any of the work except you remember how you felt about it? Oh, and for the previous question, you felt like you were being on a mission when you had a great manager. So think back to a terrible manager, controlled, unvalued, treated unworthy, non supported, suffocated, unpredictable environment. Oh, without any goals, judge, finger pointed, tiptoeing. Oh, yeah, the tiptoeing business where you always feel like you're walking on eggs because the manager is unpredictable about what's going on. Oh, not knowing if what I was doing made any sense. So you remember these things. And if I look in the chat, when I ask these questions, people often say they remember more about how they felt with the terrible managers and they remember the best managers by name, but they might not remember anything else. So, what people remember after all the work is done, after all the products are out or not out, is people remember how they felt. And that's because we have a whole bunch of outdated management assumptions. And those outdated management assumptions color our management actions. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard of McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X says people avoid work, people need to be controlled, people don't want responsibility, that they're only motivated by money, and they have no creativity except for getting around the rules. So I have a 92-year-old dad. I speak with him every single day because, especially in the pandemic, we've had trouble getting together. His experience leads him to believe that Theory X is how you manage people. But my experience is that Theory Y actually works. That I believe and I have seen people want to master challenges. They master challenges in their lives all the time. People can manage themselves, people seek responsibility, and people want to learn and accomplish more, especially on something that's greater than they are. So, that mission comment earlier with the great manager, that when a manager offers you a mission, when an organization offers you a mission, you are able to take responsibility. You might need supported training, you might need to learn something, but you can take responsibility. And for those managers on this call who are maybe not so sure of this, think back to all of the people that you hire. Almost all of us are adults. I have not seen a teenager as a professional person in the workplace in many years. I hope that I'm wrong, but even teenagers can take responsibility. We enter into long term contracts with our loved ones, with mortgages, with rental agreements. We are trustworthy to the people in our lives. Are all people like this all the time? No, we're sometimes incongruent because we are human. But can we, by and large, do all the work? Absolutely. And here's the really big thing: people live up or down to your expectations of them. So many years ago, I did an assessment for an organization. They wanted an agile transformation, and the managers were still estimating on behalf of all the people. They estimated the stories in an iteration. They estimated that, I would call this prediction now. They would predict dates for projects and programs, and the managers were always wrong, always, always wrong. And I said to them, Why don't you just let the people do the estimation? I mean, you're not right, and the people don't have practice. How will they become managers when you move on to something else? And they did not have an answer for that, but they were afraid to let the people take responsibility for something as, to be honest, as trivial as estimating their stories for an iteration. So when you push expectations down about people, people definitely do live down to your expectations of them. In contrast, when you expect more, people are often able to give you more. It's really amazing. So there's plenty of leading and serving other myths, but let's talk about keeping marginally useful people on the team. So many years ago, I led a combination of a bunch of groups. I was a director level manager. I supported the testing team, the performance team, the reliability team, the continuing engineering team. And you guessed it, at that time, we had the build team. So the build team was one person who had a physical emergency and he had to leave work, on a Friday afternoon. So I realized I needed somebody to do the builds. I had a colleague who was looking for a job. I thought she would be fine. I'm going to call her Susan. That's not her name. So Susan came in like a ball of fire on Monday morning. I introduced her to all the teams. I asked people to walk her through how we do the builds. That all worked really well. By Tuesday, she was up and running. We had our daily builds going. This is back in the 80s. We really did not know how to do much more than daily builds. So maybe early 90s, yeah. So daily builds was as good as we could get. However, Susan was irritating to almost everybody. Well, she would say, no, you can't do that. And they would say, but I did this last week before you were here. Why can't I do that now? And she was saying, no, I won't allow that. So when your build person says, I won't allow that, I mean, what kind of idiocy is that? I was not there at several of those meetings. So people from the testing came to me, and the reliability team and the performance team, they all came to me and said, JR, you really got to do something about this. Susan is not working out. I said, okay, how about if I attend a meeting so I can actually see what's going on, offer her some feedback? So I went to a meeting. I saw this in person. I said, Susan, let's talk. I offered her feedback. I offered her coaching. She took the feedback. She did not want the coaching from me. Okay, fine. I offered, who do you want coaching from? She chose Max, not his name. She and Max worked together for several weeks, and I thought that things were getting better. But about 4 weeks later, things came to a head. The entire test team came to the door of my office. The entire performance and reliability and continuing engineering teams were all standing in the door to my office. I was in big trouble. I had done something wrong. And one of them said, JR, it's either us or Susan. We are all going to leave. And I said, well, I really screwed this up. Let me unwind this. Can we do anything about this? No. Susan has said bad things to all these people, blah, 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 blah. We have the builds every day, but we would be better off figuring out ourselves how to build every single day rather than keeping her on the team. So I said, fine. I went to her and I said, I will buy out the rest of your contract. Please leave now. Do not come back to work. Right? Just leave, because I needed to do something in fast. So what about if this is not a contract person? If you have an employee, a direct employee, and you cannot just ask them to leave, you can isolate them from the rest of the team. You can give them nothing to do. You can make sure not to promote them. You can make sure never to give them a raise, but you keep them off the team. You prevent them from making the team's experience bad, right? So you have many options as a manager, even if you have to keep the person inside the organization. So it's really, do I want experiences like this? Absolutely not. Have I experienced them? Yes, and one of them was my problem. However, I took action. I did not continue to keep this person on the team where she would make life miserable for everybody else. Now, there's an ending to this. What happened the following Monday? Somehow, the people on the test team figured out how to make builds. And because they figured it out together, we were now building twice a day, not just the nightly build. We had a noon build also. So I now learned I needed to trust the people who would do the job. I could allow them to step up and do their best work without me interfering, right? I thought we needed this person. We did not need this person. We needed to manage the load of what this person did, because this is back when we needed a build engineer. However, I could have allowed the people on these 4 different teams to actually make the decision themselves. Before Susan and their experience with her, they did not think that they could do this by themselves. After, they learned very quickly that they could. So when managers don't lead and serve, you feel as if you're really slogging. You're pushing that ball up the hill like Sisyphus. So what I have found is that people really need the chance for their autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Not to go off and be solo for autonomy, but autonomy as a team, where they understand what the purpose is and they can improve their mastery as they go. And most of us need a team for collaboration and feedback. So I find that feedback is, well, this is not a talk about feedback and the ways it can fail, but I find that when I offer feedback and I receive feedback, I am a much better person for it. And I might need coaching to go along with the feedback. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? Right? How do I change my behavior? So I need people for that. Even though I've been a consultant for 26, 7 years, something like that, I get feedback from the people I work with. I find that feedback very, very valuable. I might not have a team that's a feature team or a product team. I have various teams and people offer me feedback. When I think about few principles for leading and serving others, a psychological safety is really necessary. I find that when I teach feedback and coaching in a team, so we understand how to offer and receive feedback, how to ask for when people want coaching. So, for example, I am very good in inflicting help. I often ask, do you want to tell me something or would you like my advice also? If you want to vent, I'm here for you. But if you would like advice, I need you to ask me for that specifically. So, because there's a very big difference for being a sounding board where you just say, yeah, okay, inflicting, maybe not inflicting help, but offering advice. When people have a safe environment, that's when you can really encourage experiments and learning. We will fail. We will absolutely fail. In fact, sometimes the purpose of an experiment is to see when you fail. So I don't want to fail, which is why I never say fail fast. I say learn early because that's what I want. I want the learning, and I cannot do that without experiments. I also want to catch people succeeding. When I say to people, I really like what you did in this meeting. You helped me facilitate this meeting so that we continue to stay on track. You were very quiet about it, which really surprised me because I'm a big time extrovert and I don't know how to be quiet about it. So I learned something from you today. Now, do you think that this person will do that again and again and again? Yeah, that's reinforcing feedback. So when you catch people succeeding, it's much more useful than offering them feedback about something they might not want to do again. So for years and years and years, people have said to me, Johanna, you're too blunt and direct. Yeah, I am. I'm going to stay that way. However, about a decade ago, somebody actually said to me, Johanna, I really like that when you took the time to reframe those words so that the managers could hear, they actually heard what you were saying. And I thought, oh God, this is what people have been trying to tell me for years and years. But it totally changed the way I offer explanations to managers. And I've been a whole lot more successful. So this person caught me succeeding. they offered me reinforcing feedback that actually gave me more information and made it possible for me to change how I tend to talk. Am I perfect at it? No, absolutely no. But I am better at it than I was before. So let me talk about the third piece of this, which is that great managers lead for innovation. Drucker said every organization needs one core competence, innovation. And I have modified that to management innovation, that we need to innovate our management practices. So I would like you to think about where you or what you see as your managers spending your time. And I suspect that you see a whole lot on the right there, where managers spend a lot of time in the tactical. They want to know when will it be done, which is not an unreasonable question unless they're kind of down in the middle of the work. I find that senior leadership tends to have their fingers down into what middle management do, and then middle management has their fingers down into first line management, and the first line management has their fingers down into the teams. All those people are not working at their right level. So if we can just stop the micromanagement with people involved in the execution, we would have much freer teams, and managers would have to spend a whole lot more time on the purple side. So when managers are doing all that micromanagement, they're focused on the immediate, on the low level. They ask the how questions, not the why questions. They want to copy what other people do. So I've been helping and supporting agile transformations now for, I think at least a decade. And I have found that a lot of organizations say, I want this framework, or I want this model, I want to just copy. And I'm so good at this. I say, oh, you want to copy and paste into your organization, into your culture? And that's when they say, maybe not. It's all about the short term when you think about the tactic. Instead, I've been working with managers to focus on the strategic thinking. How do you plan at a high level? Not so much that you have a strategic plan for the next 5 years. I don't think anybody can do that. But you can say, what customers do we want? What problems do we want to solve for our customers? And when do we want to re-ask those questions? Those allow us to have high-level plans. We can have a larger scale, longer time frame, because we've answered, the why question. And that's because all of us need to figure out, how do we apply everything we know about agility to our context? Every organization is unique, which means we need long-term thinking and really understanding, how do we create a strategy that we refine and iterate through again and again. There's a ton of organizational leadership myths. If you have a lot of bureaucracy, your organization probably has a bunch of these myths. But let me talk just about standardizing on how people work, especially with their agile approach. So a lovely organization in the Boston area, I'm in the Boston area, said, we really need this agility at all levels of the organization. And they got a new CTO who had come from a much larger organization. He said, we will do Scrum. I said, Scrum is a great framework. And because I've taught workshops at this company before, I taught about, 7 or 8 workshops. I said, not all your teams can do Scrum. He actually banged the table with his fist. All of our teams will do Scrum. I want to know everybody's velocity. I want to know how everybody's committing to the right stuff at the right time. And I'm saying, so let me ask you a few questions. These 2 teams over there, they do primarily production support. Do you really want them to do Scrum? Because they cannot predict what comes in. And you have a security team over here that has some predictable work, but they more often have to respond to threats. You get threats on a minute-by-minute basis because you are a regulated industry in the financial sector. So you get all these threats. Do you really want them to stop and plan as opposed to respond to the most important threat? Well, Johanna, you really don't understand what I need. I said, I think I do understand what you need. And how about if we talk about other measures that might actually serve you better? I understand that you want velocity. How about if we look at the delays? If we look at cycle time? He said, I don't know anything about cycle time. This guy was really loud. So I said, I can help you with that, right? Let's do something much more reasonable than saying everybody must do Scrum. Scrum is very useful for a relatively co-located team that works on pretty much only one product and has very little interrupting work, right? There are many more times you can try and use Scrum, and the more interruptions you have, the less useful it is. Can you still kind of make it work? Yeah, you can. I find that there are many things about Scrum I really like. I like the cadence of understanding when we will look at stories. I like the cadence of retrospectives. You can do a whole lot more than just the minimum that you would have there. And velocity, I find a really useless measure. So if you think about what the organization needs and what every single team needs, you might find that some teams even kind of roll their own agile approach. It's all about how much predictability do you need and how much experimentation do you need to do? How much responsiveness do you need? So let's talk about those problems and then think about what that means for all the teams and what you as a manager need as part of your dashboard so you can manage in the organization. You still need data, absolutely, but you don't need velocity. So we had that conversation, and their culture is such that they are still working on their transformation, but they make it a little bit better every single year, which I think is sometimes the best you can hope for. I really like thinking about the organization's messiness. I spoke about how every single team was different with their need for responsiveness and how much predictability they had. And that's part of the messiness. The other part of the messiness is the people. People are messy, right? We have families. We've had this pandemic this past year plus. We have to take care of people that we love. So I talked about calling my dad every day. And I did not do that before the pandemic. I didn't need to, right? But now I do, because how else can I create and reinforce our relationship? If I had to have a meeting every single day when I call my dad, I would feel very pulled, right? I would feel the pull of the organization and the pull of my family needs. So this is why the organization is messy. And if we embrace it, we can figure out what better to do. This is why I really like to define the organization's why. Why do we exist? None of that business of being first in class. That's total buzzword bingo, right? It's nonsense. It's who are the customers we serve and what problems of theirs do we solve? It's all about the customer. That means we can iterate on the strategy and plan for change and get rid of a whole bunch of the bureaucracy that we often find in organizations. So the principles for leading and serving an innovative organization is to clarify the purpose, right? That's the why. Now, let me talk a little bit about seeking outcomes by optimizing for an overarching goal. Hopefully, all of your teams where you work have only one goal and it's focused on a product. But if you're like a lot of the organizations I work with, and I'm a consultant, so I see people don't call me when things are going well, right? They only call me when things are going not so well. What I find is that almost everybody has a couple of different products that they are supposed to deal with, right? So they're working on this team, but they feel pulled by this product, or they feel pulled by that manager. And why is that? Because their managers are not collaborating. So one of the things I often say is that we talk about the senior leadership team, and we talk about product to feature teams, and we don't talk about management teams. Why are managers not in teams, right? And I'm not just talking about a community of practice. I'm really talking about why are the first line managers not collaborating to eliminate the impediments in the organization? If you're a Scrum Master or an Agile project manager, you're supposed to manage the impediments for your team. I suspect many of those impediments are all about the bureaucracy of the organization. How can you possibly do that yourself? You cannot. So this is why first line managers need to collaborate. The middle managers need to work on the project portfolio so they reduce the WIP in the organization and have a common goal for all the feature teams. That's how you get the overarching goal. And you prevent people from being pulled away of their various things. Now, one of the biggest things for leading and serving and creating an innovative organization is reducing the organizational WIP, the work in progress. So you show your value-based integrity by saying no to more work. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, is that a problem? And yes, I sympathize with you and empathize with you, and that's a different talk. So let me ask you first about this. What does your organization reward? Because the rewards drive the culture. A lot of organizations still reward resource efficiency, which is the lower picture here, where people work alone, right? This is the 10x developer or the expert in your organization. The work comes in, the first person takes it, they hand it off to the next person takes it, they hand it off to the next person. Finally, they finish the work. When you work in flow efficiency, this picture in the upper right corner, that's where the team collaborates together. Now, I'm not saying you have to mob. You might only swarm. You might work in some teams, but you reduce the organizational WIP in your teams and across the organization. However, too few organizations I actually understand how do you reward people if they work in flow efficiency. And that's a huge, huge problem because when HR and managers focus on resource efficiency, they're managing via cost accounting. They think that divide and conquer works, that you can divide up the work and somehow conquer it all. They think that partial work is fine, that's inventory, and that cost accounting works for software. But the problem is cost accounting came out of slavery. So if you have not read Caitlin Rosenthal's Accounting for Slavery, it's a horrific read. That's when people developed cost accounting. So knowledge work is not the same as factory work, and certainly not the same as slavery. Even factory work should not get done by resource efficiency. All this thinking is antithetical to Agile approaches. So if I think about the culture and what we want, managers create and refine the culture. So Shine talks about his values and assumptions. He really confuses me. If we think about culture as how people treat each other, what people can discuss, how the rewards work, now we are really thinking about the culture. So a lot of people say, well, we have some people and they're really not performing very well. We need resource efficiency to really properly reward them, etc. That's where you need to bring in Lewin's equation, which is the behavior of the person is a function of that person in the environment. People always work towards what they perceive as rewards, and they work against what they perceive as threats. And the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. So if you tolerate not so helpful behavior, you will get that. And you will get it, and you will get it, and you will get it. So when I talk about Agile management habits, I'm talking about progress, not perfection. Nobody is perfect. I'm also not asking you to change your beliefs. I'm asking you to consider possible new behaviors and to always start with yourself. And remember that people remember how you made them feel. That's what they remember for years and years and years and years. And if you don't know the why, nothing else matters. So the 7 principles, again, I've talked about these in little bits and pieces, and I hope that you will stay in touch with me. I write an email newsletter called The Pragmatic Manager. I would love to link with you on LinkedIn and the Modern Management Made Easy books. So Stefan, I was going to come off of, stopping the share so I can see people. Is that going to work for you?
Totally. I have 3 questions for you. So the first one is from Corinne. How long did it take the team to recover from the Susan experience?
Well, so I was very uncomfortable during the Susan experience. And this is not a surprise to anybody else. And when I realized that the team could actually figure out how to do all their work without my interference, first I felt kind of silly. And I said, okay, right. We all thought before this we needed a build person. And we all learned after this that we did not. So I found that that was an eye-opening experience for all of us concerned. I probably felt fine after about a week. And I learned from it again and again and again and again. That's really, I think that the learning has gone on for years and years.
Antoine asks, what difference do you make between evaluation and feedback?
So evaluation is when you offer a judgment on somebody. So I don't know how many of you have seen me speak before. I have. I did not get the fashion gene in my family. I have learned I can write. I can wear a nice top. I have black pants, and that's my uniform for all of my talks. Right. In the winter when I'm home, I wear a fleece jacket, and in the summer, well, it's cool today, but I often have flowered sweaters. That's the extent of my fashion gene. If somebody says to me, Johanna, you don't really look all that fashionable. That's a judgment, right? I know this. I don't actually care. I'm too much of a geek. However, if they say to me, I notice that you have a similar wardrobe all the time. Would you like some assistance diversifying your wardrobe? Now, they've offered me a little feedback, but they have not inflicted help on me yet. For me, that's really the difference. If you judge somebody, you're not offering feedback. You're not offering them a chance to change. They might not want a chance to change, but they might want to use that. So, yeah. And I might not care about your judgment of my boring wardrobe.
Okay, the final question from Bree. How much time do you give people on average to improve based on direct feedback before you think it's necessary to take harsher action? For example, termination, or as you said, removing them from the team.
So I have a very short fuse. I offer feedback when I see somebody doing something that is not reflective of the culture I want. I offer them feedback right away, as soon as possible, right? Maybe not in the meeting, but right after the meeting. I might follow that up with more feedback over the course of the next week or so. If they persist in doing this kind of behavior, I will offer them the chance for coaching. But then I start either what people might call a performance improvement plan or a get well plan, maybe with or without HR. I do not have a lot of patience for people who are not able or want to change to a better culture. I want to create a much better culture, and I do not want them to do that. So I might offer feedback and coaching over, say, a 3 to 4 week, maybe even a 2-month period. But then we start in a performance improvement plan, and I get them off the team as soon as possible, because it's just not worth it. And if you really have a bad person, offer them to a competitor, right? And then everybody wins. You get that person out of there. The competitor might get somebody that they like, and you have helped that person find a new job. You can be very free and happy in this. So yeah, I'm really help everybody succeed.
So maybe we have time for a final question. Anna asks, could you please give a couple of tips on how to say no to more work?
So this is why I wrote the project portfolio book. I have several articles on my website, and if you want, I can put them in Slack later on. If you ask that question in the Slack, I will put the links in the Slack. But it's all about visualizing all the work and understanding your capacity. So whether it's your capacity as a person or the capacity as a team, often in cycle time, or even counting what you do, then I find that that's really the way. But visualization and then having a useful conversation. If the person persists in asking you to do more work, you might say, okay, I will decide what work to do and when, right? Because the person who's asking you to do more work than you are capable of is not making the project portfolio decisions, whether it's at the portfolio level or your level as an individual contributor, right? Or a team. So you will say, yeah, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I'm not going to do.
There's one more question. If you have a few moments, Johanna, it's just come in.
I do.
If I don't like an idea or suggestion, how can I give the person the feeling of being heard without having to do it or casually say, good idea, I'll investigate it later?
That's a tricky one. So I find that when I think about it that way, I often have to say, tell me more. Because if my first reaction is that cannot possibly work, I might not actually realize what the idea is. So I have used tell me more. That's one thing. I often say, can I talk out loud about that? Because I'm an extrovert, so I want to talk out loud. If the other person is an introvert, I might say, can we both write down what 3 things will work from that, and what 3 things might be a problem from that? So I find that when I start to talk about what will work about this idea and what won't work, about this idea, I am more likely to engage in conversation as opposed to me saying, not going to work, right? So I find that when we are, let me rephrase. I am very quick to move to judgment, right? I will judge an idea in the first, in a second. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's bad. So what I find is that if I start doing a little exploration with people, I find out where my resistance is coming from, often from insufficient information versus the other person wanting to impose their idea. So if this is in the Slack, I will actually look for it there also.
Yeah, that was really, really a great talk. So it was amazing. I mean, all the people listening in, you could hear a needle drop. That was really funny to observe. And a lot of people ask a lot of questions. So that's really a really good outcome.
I'm really glad you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.